All right, contrarian quarter. And my view today is this. Grab's AI pivot is being positioned as the company's next growth engine. I think it's a category error, and the market's 15% sell-off after the first ever profitable quarter is actually telling you something important that Grab's management isn't acknowledging.
Okay, that's pointed. Walk me through it.
Here's the argument. Grab's core business is a logistics and transportation marketplace. Its competitive advantage is driver supply, geographic density, and consumer habit in specific urban markets. Those advantages are real and durable, but they have nothing to do with AI. When Grab's president says they're building proprietary AI agents instead of integrating with existing models, that's not a technology strategy. That's a capital allocation decision to spend on something that won't move the needle on the metrics that actually drive the stock. Uber doesn't win because it has better AI than Lyft. It wins because it has more drivers in more cities. The same logic applies to Grab.
But isn't AI genuinely transformative for the operational layer of a logistics business? Route optimization, demand forecasting, driver earnings maximization. These are real use cases where better AI models create measurable cost improvements. It's not just a buzzword in this context.
For operational AI, absolutely. Using AI to optimize routing or reduce empty miles, that's legitimate, and Grab should be doing it. But that's not what the press releases are describing. They're describing consumer-facing AI agents, merchant AI tools, driver AI assistants. That's product development competing with every other app on a user's phone for engagement time. And here's the uncomfortable question. Does a person ordering Grab food in Jakarta care whether the recommendation came from a sophisticated AI model or a simple collaborative filter? The evidence from Meituan in China, the most sophisticated food delivery AI operation in the world, is that AI improves margins at the back end, but barely moves consumer behavior at the front end.
So the bear case for Grab's AI strategy is it's allocating capital toward consumer-facing AI features that won't differentiate the product, while the actual value driver, financial services penetration, requires regulatory capital, credit risk management, and trust building that has nothing to do with large language models.
Exactly. And C Limited's outperformance tells you what the market actually rewards. C didn't announce an AI moonshot. It cut costs, focused on financial services unit economics, and let Shopee's monetization compound quietly. The stock is up significantly. Grab announced profitability and an AI pivot, and the stock fell 15%. The market is telling you which strategy it believes in. And the question I want our listeners to sit with is this. In emerging market consumer tech, is AI a genuine competitive differentiator, or is it a narrative that management teams use to justify continued investment spending when investors are demanding capital returns? Because those two interpretations lead to completely different conclusions about whether you buy Grab at current levels, wait for C's next catalyst, or avoid the entire category until the Grab Go-To merger resolution removes the binary overhang. Part 4 has our answer. Stay with us. All right, action items. 3 concrete things to do with everything we discussed today.
Number 1. Use the Grab Go-To merger resolution as your primary entry trigger for Southeast Asia tech exposure. This is the binary event that determines the entire competitive landscape. If the merger is approved by Indonesian, Singaporean, and Malaysian regulators in the first half of 2026, Grab becomes the dominant super app across the region's most important markets, and the competitive subsidy war ends. That's a structural margin improvement catalyst that the current stock price does not fully reflect. If regulators block it, Go-To needs a new strategic plan, and Grab continues to compete on 2 fronts. Do not size a meaningful position in either name before this resolution. The optionality is too wide.
Number 2, treat C Limited as the benchmark for what Southeast Asia tech can look like when the business model actually works. C cut early, focused on financial services margin, and let Shopee's monetization compound quietly. Its current valuation, trading at approximately 2.8 times forward revenue versus Grab at 3.4 times, reflects the market's acknowledgement that C's path to sustained free cash flow is more visible. For investors who want Southeast Asia tech exposure without the binary merger risk, C is the cleaner expression of the long-term digital financial services thesis.
Number 3. Watch the second-generation founder ecosystem emerging from these super apps. A January 2026 report from the Financial Revolutionist identified a new wave of Southeast Asian startups being built by ex-Grab, ex-Gojek, and ex-C employees. Vertical AI for logistics, B2B software for SME merchants, and embedded insurance infrastructure. These companies are pre-revenue or early revenue, but they are being built by people who understand the regional market at an operational level that most Silicon Valley investors don't. The venture funding flowing into this cohort in 2026 is an early signal of where the next Southeast Asia tech cycle begins. Follow the talent exodus from the super apps as a leading indicator.
The takeaway for today? Southeast Asia's super app era is not over, but it has matured into something that looks more like conventional financial services investing than tech growth investing. The companies that understood that earliest, see most clearly, are being rewarded. The ones still trying to grow their way to profitability through new product categories are being penalized. The AI narrative is real in the operational layer and irrelevant at the consumer layer. And the Grab-Go-To merger is the single most important catalyst in the region this year, with implications that extend far beyond the two companies involved.
And the meta lesson? In emerging market tech, distribution is the moat. Not the app, not the AI, not the brand. The ability to reach a customer in Surabaya or Chiang Mai or Cebu with a financial product they actually need, that's what compounds. Everything else is overhead.
Next time on Asia Tech Macro, we're going back to the macro layer and looking at what Trump's tariff escalation in early 2026 means specifically for Asian tech supply chains. The 25% tariff on electronic imports, the exemptions that didn't happen, and which Asian economies are net winners and net losers from the new trade architecture. That's next.
That one has enormous implications for everything we've covered this season. Cannot wait.
Stay data-driven. Bye.
Contrarian Corner. And my position today is this. The Supreme Court's IEEPA ruling is being covered as a defeat for Trump's trade agenda and a relief for Asian tech supply chains. I think that framing is exactly backwards. The ruling is actually bad for Asia in the medium term. And here's why.
Okay, that's counterintuitive. Make the case.
Under IEEPA, the tariff architecture was legally fragile. 2,000 importers had filed cases. The courts were moving towards invalidation. Every CFO in Asia knew there was a real probability that the reciprocal tariffs would be struck down or reduced through litigation. That legal uncertainty was actually a supply chain planning asset. It gave companies a reason to delay irreversible manufacturing relocations and wait for the legal dust to settle. Now that uncertainty is gone. Section 232 is legally bulletproof. It has survived every court challenge for decades. Section 301 has survived every court challenge. The new Section 122 investigations being launched will produce Section 301 tariffs that are just as durable. What the Supreme Court ruling did was remove the only mechanism that could have actually reduced the tariff burden on Asia, judicial invalidation, and replaced it with legally unassailable alternatives. The tariffs got more permanent, not less.
That's a genuinely uncomfortable read. So your argument is that the ruling clarified the legal architecture in a way that makes long-term tariff exposure more certain, not less.
Exactly. And there's a second dimension. The Section 122 tariff is capped at 15% and expires after 150 days unless Congress acts. That sounds like good news. But Trump has already launched new Section 301 investigations. Section 301 tariffs have no cap and no expiration. They can be targeted at specific countries and specific product categories. The Biden administration left Section 301 tariffs on Chinese goods in place for 4 years. There is zero reason to believe Trump's Section 301 tariffs will be any less durable. The temporary relief from the Section 122 ceiling is exactly that, temporary. What comes after July 24th is likely to be worse, more targeted, and legally invulnerable. The companies that interpret the current 15% flat rate as a signal that the tariff environment is improving are making a planning error that will be expensive to unwind.
Okay, I want to push back on one element of that. Isn't there a scenario where the legal constraints on Section 122, the 150-day limit, the 15% cap, actually force a congressional negotiation that produces something more predictable and bilateral? Trade agreements, not executive action. Because if Section 301 investigations take 12 to 18 months to complete, there's a window where Congress has to either extend Section 122 or pass new legislation. That legislative process creates negotiating leverage for Asian economies in a way that IEEPA's unlimited executive discretion never did.
That's the strongest bull case, and I want to be honest that it's not implausible. But here's the question I want our listeners sitting with. In the past 10 years, has the U.S. Congress demonstrated any ability to pass trade legislation under time pressure that produces predictable, rules-based outcomes for Asian supply chains? Because the historical record on that is not encouraging. The Trans-Pacific Partnership died in Congress. The USMCA renegotiation took 2 years. Bilateral trade deals with Japan and South Korea have been in various stages of negotiation for years with minimal resolution. The optimistic scenario requires congressional functionality that has not been reliably present. The pessimistic scenario, Section 301 investigations producing targeted, durable, legally bulletproof tariffs by late 2026, requires only that the executive branch continue doing what it has been doing. Which scenario would you assign higher probability to? Part 4. Let's get to action items.
Number 1. Build your Asian tech supply chain positions around Section 232 and Section 301 exposure, not the current Section 122 rate. The 15% flat rate visible today is temporary. It expires July 24th. The permanent tariff architecture, Section 232 on steel, aluminum, and semiconductors, plus the incoming Section 301 investigations, is what determines long-term manufacturing economics. For investors, this means semiconductor equipment makers with U.S. manufacturing exposure, Tokyo Electron, Applied Materials, Lam Research, are structurally better positioned than pure-play Asian chip assemblers facing ongoing tariff uncertainty. For corporates, it means the India and Vietnam manufacturing infrastructure built under the China Plus One strategy remains strategically correct, but the speed of expansion should be calibrated to the July 24th cliff, not the current rate.
Number 2. Thailand is the most undervalued beneficiary in this entire story, and almost nobody is talking about it. Rhodium Group's supply chain analysis showed that Thailand already supplies the U.S. market with printers, copiers, and fax machines as the top provider, and faces 0% tariffs on printed circuit boards and switches versus 27 to 45% on Chinese equivalents. That differential survives the IEEPA ruling intact. Thailand is not in the headlines. It is not the subject of Section 232 investigations. It has a trade agreement framework that is less contested than Vietnam's. For investors looking for asymmetric exposure to supply chain reorientation with lower headline risk, Thai industrial and electronics manufacturing real estate investment trusts and logistics infrastructure are a cleaner expression of the China Plus One thesis than Vietnamese or Taiwanese names that are drawing more regulatory attention.
Number 3. Watch the July 24th Section 122 expiration as the most important macro trigger for Asian tech in the second half of 2026. Between now and then, the Trump administration will be running Section 301 investigations and negotiating bilateral deals under the pressure of that deadline. The outcomes of those negotiations, which countries get deals, which get targeted tariffs, which get extensions, will determine the competitive manufacturing map for the next 3 to 5 years. Calendar July 24th. Whatever happens in the 2 weeks before and after that date will tell you more about the structural positioning of Asian tech supply chains than everything else combined this year.
The takeaway. The Supreme Court ruling on IEEPA was legally significant and practically irrelevant. The tariff burden on Asian tech supply chains did not decrease. It changed legal clothing. Section 232 and Section 301, the durable, port-tested authorities, remained fully in place. The new Section 122 15% rate is a ceiling with a countdown clock. The Section 301 investigations launched this week are the real story. And Thailand, quietly, just became a more interesting supply chain destination than at any point in the past decade.
The meta lesson. In trade policy, legal form and economic substance are not the same thing. When courts change the legal authority for a tariff without changing the underlying political will that created it, the supply chain impact is continuity, not relief. Build for permanence, plan for July.
Next time on Asia Tech Macro, we're heading to India. The Modi government's semiconductor ambitions, the Tata Electronics-Apple supply chain relationship, and whether India's chip dreams are a genuine industrial policy success story or a decade-long aspiration dressed up in press releases. We'll have the data.
That one has been on our list for a long time. Cannot wait.
Stay data-driven. Bye.